is it actually technically possible still to reach the 1.5 degree that we have set, i.e. that temperatures should not rise more than 1.5 degrees until the end of this century, as everybody has said that they would do and support with action in the Paris Agreement in 2015. Now, there is an answer in the video that we're going to share with you now.
As the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, we must think carefully about the future that we want to build. We face a worsening climate crisis with record temperatures causing rampant fires, rapidly melting polar ice, and extreme flooding. The world has already reached a global average temperature rise of 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. A world of 1.5 degrees Celsius is almost unimaginable and must be avoided at all costs. Fortunately, a breakthrough climate model shows that we have a window to stay below the dangerous threshold of 1.5 C, achieving net zero emissions before 2040. The two-year collaboration with 17 leading scientists, entitled Achieving the Paris Climate Agreement Goals, shows that we can prevent the worst impacts of climate change with currently available solutions, unlocking trillions in economic benefits. In the 1.5 C scenario, there are two main efforts required: a rapid decarbonisation of our energy system and large-scale land restoration, which combined provide a 66% likelihood of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius. For the global energy transition, electricity use will roughly double from today's levels by 2050, meeting a majority of our energy needs across all three major sectors: transportation, industry, and buildings and infrastructure. Half of all transportation will be powered by electricity, with hydrogen and other renewable fuels replacing petroleum products. Industry will double its electricity use, meeting more than 1/3 of heating and process energy requirements, with the remainder provided by renewable fuels. Building and infrastructure will also double electricity use, with more than 1/3 of heating needs met by geothermal, biomass, and solar heat sources. Coal will rapidly diminish, followed by a gradual phase-out of oil and gas, while renewables will expand from approximately 20% today to 100% in 2050, led by a rapid expansion of solar and wind power. Renewable fuels and energy efficiency will play a major role in reducing overall consumption. The transition to 100% renewable energy for all electricity and heating requires supplemental investments of 1.1 trillion per year, less than 1/4 of what governments currently spend on fossil fuels. Even with this rapid energy transition, staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius will require a major effort to protect and restore natural ecosystems, the carbon sinks which keep our global climate system in balance. In addition to a rapid phase-out of carbon emissions from deforestation, the 1.5 C scenario identifies a large potential for carbon dioxide removal through 4 restoration pathways. Natural forest restoration, combined with reforestation on 350 megahectares of degraded land and sustainable forestry practices, can deliver 480 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide removal by 2100. In the agricultural sector, reducing nitrogen and methane emissions, along with tree planting on croplands, can deliver the additional mitigation required to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. To learn more about specific regional transition pathways, download the F20 Executive Briefing, Achieving the Paris Climate Goals in the COVID-19 Era.
And we are in the happiest situation to have the lead author of this study here in the studio in our Foundation's 20 Climate Solutions studio in Hamburg. Now, let's say that Dr. Sven Teske hasn't come just for us to Hamburg and made the way from Sydney, but you're here anyway. So we just grabbed the opportunity. Now, Sven, this study is definitely a breakthrough in thinking model. what is the difference to all of these other scenarios that we get sort of constantly fed by the IPCC, by a lot of the institutes that are working and trying to inform us, the public, on the situation of the climate crisis?
Well, we actually had a scenario talk for this study in terms of using all available technologies. We use technologies which are currently cost competitive, which are available on the market and proven. We actually looked into all the sectors. We looked into transport, into industry, into private sectors, services. We also looked into the system analysis. So basically, we put the whole energy supply together and separated 72 world regions and simulated not just our energy supply year by year, but also hour by hour. So it's a very comprehensive study which has been put together over 1.5 years, together with the University of Technology Sydney, the German Aerospace Centre, and the University of Melbourne. We also had our energy system simulated and the non-energy carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions, which is very important. We have we basically identified a carbon budget we have to stay under 1.5 or within 1.5 degrees with 66% chance. And we try to model that carbon budget in the energy system. And at the same time, we put together a system and a concept how to use natural carbon sinks. Because even if we organize the energy transition, which is cost competitive and technically doable, we still need to stop deforestation and start reforestation. When we did this study, I'm based in Sydney, and during that time we had bushfires. We had 6 months of bushfires. And what we see right now in California, we have seen those skies in Sydney for months and months and months. And my team and me, we were really motivated to actually implement a concept and work out a concept which works. We have done not only the energy system and the non-energy greenhouse gas emissions, we also did an employment analysis looking at how can we actually organize the transition in terms of employment. So we modeled how many, for example, electricians do we need currently and how many electricians do we need in the future? Is it possible to actually organize the transition without leaving anyone behind? Because what we need to do is we don't only have a technical concept, we also need a social and socio-economic concept, because if we don't have the support of the general population and the workforce, we won't be able to do that. First and foremost, we also looked into very specific countries. And after we finished this book, we also did lots of studies for other countries. For example, we had a specific analysis just published for Bangladesh. Bangladesh is probably one of the more difficult countries to implement 100% renewables because of space constraints, of land constraint. So we do energy scenarios for many different countries, but each country has a specific geographical and social concept and system, because we need to reflect what's there and then sort of set the solution in this context. And we spoke to lots of people. We have been, my team and me, we have been to Bangladesh, spoke to people. What do they actually need in terms of energy supply? And then we got back and sort of simulated future energy scenarios. For Bangladesh, for example, we need lots of offshore wind and floating solar, because we have flooding problems there and space constraint. While if we do a scenario for Saudi Arabia, for example, or for the United Arab Emirates, that will include lots of solar, obviously, lots of production of hydrogen and synthetic fuels in order to produce fuels for aviation and shipping in the future. So for countries who generate energy right now, like oil and gas, there is a market in the future for those countries to generate synthetic fuels and hydrogen. So this is basically, I think it's a very unique point for our work, that we always try to start where the situation is in the country and then implement the solution. Solar and wind will be the most important technologies for the foreseeable future, but there are many other technologies we need, and we implement all those technologies in order to have a comprehensive concept.
Well, thank you very much for giving us all that background to everything else. There are probably, Sven, I would like to sort of ask you two questions. One is, both in Europe with the Green New Deal, with the Green Deal, we're saying 2030 as sort of the deadline by which we have to have achieved things. Other scenarios go to 2050. Yet what we hear yesterday, but what we also read, is the question of urgency. So which of the target dates does make sense and which is feasible?
Well, in OECD countries, industrialized countries, we actually start tomorrow, or actually today. So we have very little time to delay. In order to stay within the carbon budget, we need to start right now. And we, as I said, we did this scenario development in 2018-19. So we implemented 2020 already as sort of the first year of action. Because of the pandemic, we are actually right on track for our 1.5 degrees scenario, for the wrong reason, unfortunately, but we are on track with our scenario. So we have a first mover like OECD countries like Europe and North America who go into renewables much quicker than, for example, developing countries. So we implemented that. Europe and North America, those regions need to change their power plants anyway, because the power plants are getting old. They need to be replaced with others. So this is a good chance to actually implement renewables. While developing countries need to actually set up their new energy supply, and starting with renewables is much quicker than with fossil fuels. So basically, we have not much time to delay it, but there is a possibility right now, technology-wise and economically, to implement it right now.
I think both in the film and in your explanation, you were talking a lot about the carbon sinks, i.e. reforestation, as a major aspect in actually hitting the goal. Let me just ask you, there's also the do's, but there's also the don'ts, like sort of not installing the 150 coal installations that are dreamt of at the moment, direction India, Indonesia, China, whatever. From a scientific point of view, how could you give us arguments not to do that?
That's very easy. We are here in Hamburg, and as you probably hear from my accent, I'm actually from Hamburg, but I live and work in Australia.
Well, I can hear the Australian accent.
Not far from here, there's a coal power plant called Moorburg. That has been built and connected to the grid in 2015, the year I moved to Australia. Now it's discussed that it's not economic anymore, and they want to shut it down after 5 years. You actually have to operate it at least 25 or 30 years in order to make it economic. So Hamburg sets a really good example of how not to do it. Don't go into those technologies. It is a very efficient coal power plant, but it still emits CO2, and it's not economic anymore. So look to Hamburg and learn what not to do.
I would love to continue chatting with you. I could actually do it all day. Alas, we have only limited time. I would say thank you very much. Whatever you do, keep up the good messages and keep up your own personal energy to bring the good news to us. And I love the fact that as a scientist, you actually sort of give recommendations as well, because we need scientists that actually say, oh, these are not just the facts and figures, but here is what you must do. Thank you very much, Dr. Sven Teske, ladies and gentlemen.